Hey everybody, I have a really good one for you today. So we're going to break down the difference between drones and dogs. Okay, so going over topics like cost, benefits, limitations, where one is better than the other. So I would really encourage you to watch this video. Drone operators, if I'm incorrect on anything, please let me know in the comments because I'd really be curious. Big shout out to Missouri Drone Deer Recovery LLC for providing some pictures and then some really good insight on the drone recovery. Give it a watch.
Atta baby! Woo!
So let's talk about setup. Okay, with a dog and dog handling teams, we have just that. So we have dogs. So I use bloodhounds. Love the breed. They have great noses. Mabel is the smartest dog I have ever owned by far. Great family dogs. Everything about them I love. There's many different types of dogs out there that do track though. So you have Catahoulas, Labs, wired hair dachshunds, Bavarian mountain hounds. You can even have a mixed breed to track wounded deer. It's all about the dog really, the drive of the dog, how smart the dog is, how well they're trained by the handler and whatnot. Many different dogs do it. I run bloodhounds, love the breed personally, and that's just my personal preference there when it comes to blood tracking. So the setup for a drone, from drone operators I've talked to and whatnot, it seems like the Mavic 3 and the Matrix 30 are some of the top two that are used out there. So those are thermal drones. You don't need artificial lights, nothing like that. They fly them at night. They can see obviously thermal imaging with that. So those are going to be the most common drones. With that said, any drone I think can work, and there's probably other drone operators that use different models. If you are a drone operator that doesn't use the Mavic 3 or the Matrix 30, please comment what drone you use to recover deer. Cost is probably the biggest talking point when it comes to recovering your deer with a dog tracking team or with a drone recovery team. Okay, so me personally, what I charge is $125 to drop the dog, and then it's, if we tailgate the deer, another $125. Okay, so $250 total for me to come out and recover your deer. And that gets 5 seasons of experience, hundreds of tracks with my dog, over 100 recoveries, tailgated deer being recoveries. And I think that's a pretty fair price for what I offer and how good Mabel is. Many other trackers in the state, really experienced trackers that are way better than I am, go tips only. And that's just how they operate, just off of tips. Drones, from the operators I've spoke to around me in Northwest Missouri, most drones are gonna run $450 to fly the drone, and then another $100 if the deer is located, dead or alive. I think that's a pretty solid rate across the state. If you are a drone operator and you charge something different, less or more than that, feel free. Please comment. I'd really be curious to see what you all are charging kind of statewide, not just in the Northwest Missouri part of the state. So let's talk about recovery definitions, because these are two different definitions that are used between dog tracking teams and drone teams. And it can get confusing looking at the recovery statistics numbers. So with a dog, what dog handlers count as recoveries is tailgating a dead deer. Okay, that means we came out, we tracked, we found your deer dead, we put it on the tailgate essentially. Okay, so when you hear dog tracking teams that have a 40 or 50% recovery rate, that means we tailgate and find 40 or 50% of our deer dead. Okay, a drone on the other hand, their recovery rates are more locating deer dead or alive is how they look at that. And you'll see drone operators, Not that this is wrong or bad, it's just different than how dog handlers do it. You will see them advertise, 90, 95% recovery rates, and that may be the case for locating the deer. But their recovery is if they find that target deer dead or alive. So a good example here is if somebody spine shocks a buck during rifle season, the chances of that deer dying are 1% out of 100, right? So a dog tracking team can come out and track it. We're not going to find the deer because the deer isn't dead, okay? So that would count against us in the recovery statistics, okay? A drone can come out, locate that deer, if they locate it, and say, yep, found it, it's not going to die. Both tracking teams did the job. The deer's just not going to die, right? One, it counts as a recovery. One, it does not count as a recovery. So understand the differences between recoveries with drones and dogs because it's quite different. Let's talk about distance that you can essentially track or travel with a dog versus a drone. Okay? With dogs, me personally, me and Mabel, we have gone over 2 miles, multiple different tracks, and recovered deer. I know there is another tracker in Missouri, Relentless Game Recovery. He went 5.2 miles this year and recovered a deer for a hunter. Generally, your deer's not going to go 2 miles. It's not going to go 5 miles. But it does happen, and it has happened, and we have recovered deer at those distances before. The one thing that plays into that is property lines. For us to even go 2 miles on a track, we have to generally get permission on more than one property, which is very possible and happens quite often. But there is some legwork on the back end that goes into that. From what I've understood on the drones is you're looking at a 3/4 mile radius or a 1 mile radius from last blood. I think that's pretty accurate for the drones. I think they can go further. You can check with your local drone operators and kind of see how far they go. Drone operators, again, comment if you have gone further than that. I'd really like to know as well. So let's talk about limitations, okay? And this is kind of the big one when talking about recovering deer. There is no perfect tool out there that is going to 100% find your deer every single time, okay? And I want to be clear about that. Dogs make mistakes. Drones don't find every deer, and that's just the way it is. So with a dog, we are limited as a tracking team by, like I said, property lines. So property lines are our biggest nemesis, especially when you get into late October, early November, the hunting's getting real good. Some property owners are like, hey, I don't want you over in my bedding area, which I understand. and sometimes it is what it is. Dogs can have off days. Just like humans, a dog can have an off day or something, the dog may not feel good that day and just it could happen. I will say with the more experience a tracking team gets, the more they can kind of identify when their dog is having an off day and kind of work around that. On the other side of it, a handler could misread their dog. This is, for me specifically, was more common in the early years of tracking with Mabel. I was inexperienced. I didn't have hundreds of tracks to get to know my dog as well. So there was multiple that I misread her early on in our career. I will say after 5 seasons with the dog, we know each other pretty dang well. So I do not misread her very often anymore. Another thing is multiple live deer in the area. So this is something that can be a struggle with any tracking team, any experience, is when you get rutting bucks chasing does and spreading their scent everywhere, it can take a minute to work it out. And that's just the nature of the beast, right? So we're in there, there's just scent spread everywhere. Bucks are marking their territory. It can get confusing to a dog on the ground tracking a specific deer. Physical exhaustion. And this is something that you're going to see obviously less with drones, maybe more with tracking teams. We had one day this year where we ran 6 tracks in a day. At the end of that day, when I rolled into the house at midnight, I was tired. I was exhausted. Okay, so that next day, I opted to rest Mabel and I. And that's just a limitation of being boots on the ground with a dog, is you can only go as far as you physically can without pushing you or your dog too far. This one is kind of a limitation, kind of not. Non-fatal hits, we can't verify a lot of times, right? So if a deer was shot in no man's land, so high back, right, and it's not going to die, the chance of us catching up to that deer and physically seeing the wound and knowing is little to none. With that said, dog tracking teams, in our experience, we can normally make a really, really accurate determination whether it's going to be a dead deer or a live deer by all the evidence we see, how the dog is acting. There's multiple ways out there that we can tell. Another limitation is if it has been heavily grid searched, or maybe scent conditions are not that great. So grid searching, though it's very possible for an experienced dog to work through a grid search. We've worked through many grid searches and found deer. A lot of times it does make it difficult. Okay, so if you're walking and you're trailing blood or stepping on the scent path of this deer, and let's say you take a left but the deer went straight, well, to the dog it looks like you went left. So the dog essentially has to take extra time and work that scent pool out, and work that grid search area out in order to find the deer. Again, not impossible to recover deer on grid search scenarios, but is more difficult than a clean line. With drones, there are some limitations that I have seen and spoke to drone operators. One, you got to have your FAA Part 107. So you have to go through some extra licensing in order to legally fly a drone. Another limitation is you can't use artificial lights per Missouri regulation. So at night, if you are thermal imaging and you see a deer that you think may be your deer, legally you can't shine a light on that deer. So you're as good as your thermal imaging in that scenario. Probably the biggest one with drones as a limitation is going to be the canopy. Okay, when there's a bunch of leaves on trees, you're not going to be able to see under them as well. Early season, this is a big problem for drone operators. Again, if the deer died in a CRP or a standing bean field, easy peasy. But if they go into a thick forest with a heavy canopy, it's going to be more difficult on them. On the flip side, even after all the leaves fall off, you still have cedar thickets. So if a deer goes into a cedar thicket and dies underneath a giant cedar tree, it's going to be difficult to locate with a drone as well. I've also heard from hunters that have utilized drones that multiple live deer in an area can be an issue. So if there's 25 deer in this bedding area and your deer isn't necessarily dead or laying on its side, it can be difficult to figure out which deer exactly is yours, or if any are your wounded deer. With any technology, batteries can be a limitation, and that's generally drone operators, I assume, are going to have enough batteries to handle and know their equipment. But regardless, you're still using batteries. It can still be a limitation if you run out of charge. And then weather and thermals are going to be another limitation. So if the weather's poor, if it's super hot out and you can't run the thermal drone or thermal imaging, then that's going to be a limit. So drone operators, if you have other limits, definitely let me know. I'd be curious to see what else there is out there. The last and probably biggest limitation of a drone, and this is not a knock on drones at all, I understand, I've priced these things out, they are very expensive, is their cost. So they are quite a bit more expensive to fly a drone and recover a deer than it is to have a tracking dog come out. So probably canopy and cost are going to be your biggest limitations when hiring a drone operator. So another thing I want to dive into are the benefits. Okay, again, there's not one tool in the world that is 100% at everything when it comes to recovering wounded game. Okay, there's too many outliers out there. A dog is a tool, a drone is a tool. So, benefits of a dog. Okay, in Missouri, we can have the hunter dispatch a wounded animal. So if we're tracking and I come up on the buck we are tracking and it is wounded and can't get out of his bed, I can have the hunter step up, dispatch the deer, and there we are with a recovery. I like the fact that we can see the physical evidence as we are tracking. So I'm looking down, I'm looking to see what kind of blood we see, how high up the trees it is, how the dog is acting with said evidence, what the deer is kind of doing, and all of that is pieced together into whether I think that deer is dead or alive. Though we like to see the physical evidence, we don't need it to track deer. A trained tracking dog can go hundreds of yards, thousands of yards without one speck of blood, and that's because we use the interdigital scent gland in the hoof to actually track the wounded game. Now that said, a dog is tracking multiple things, right? So we're not just tracking the hoof scent, we're tracking saliva, dandruff, if it's a gut shot, the gut material, blood, hoof scent, all that good stuff. One of the benefits I also personally love the most is the relationship between the handler and the dog. I don't think there's anything in the world that can beat a relationship between the two. Mabel in there is my best friend, essentially, right? So that dog's with me every day. Me and her have a connection that me and no other animal have ever had. You know the direction of travel, right? So you know, hey, the deer went this way or the deer went to this property, and you can be able to kind of piece together from there what that wounded deer did, where they went, all that good stuff. Last but not least, the benefit of a tracking dog is the cost. So it's relatively inexpensive to get an experienced team out there to find your wounded game. The benefits of a drone are if it's been heavily grid searched, okay, and I've seen this multiple times every year, is I'll get the call after they've looked for, you know, hey, me and 6 guys grid searched this for 9 hours today. And I'm like, holy cow, that scent is spread everywhere. So in a scenario like that, though a dog could definitely find a deer after a grid search, it does make it more difficult, like I have said earlier. But a drone can fly over and they're not worried about scent lines or scent conditions or anything like that. That is a big benefit of the drone that I have personally seen. There's also less physical effort involved, right? So with a dog and a tracking team, 1 week, a couple years ago, I think I put 36 miles on the ground in like 4 days of tracking. That physically got to me, right? So a drone, you can run multiple or fly multiple calls in one night and not break a sweat. So that's a big benefit of the drone that I see. Property lines are not a hard stop for a drone. Obviously, a drone can fly over whatever property is there. If they locate your deer, then you can work on getting permission and you can say, hey, my deer is dead right here. I would like to go get it. And if a landowner knows that deer is dead right there, they're probably going to be more apt to letting you get on there versus if you're unsure if the deer even went on that property. No scent conditions is not a big deal. Drones don't need scent to fly. That would be a benefit if the conditions were very poor. And then another big benefit that I like with drone recovery is they can verify non-fatal shots. Now, you're going to pay a recovery fee for them to verify it's non-fatal, but that peace of mind is fantastic. If you spine shock a deer or you stick him in the shoulder and then you can locate him with a drone and see the wound, I think that says a lot about whether that deer is going to die right away. And then you can kind of sleep a little better at night knowing, hey, it's likely a non-fatal shot. I hope everybody enjoyed the talking points today. Please comment if you have any questions or you disagree with what I say or you agree with what I've said. I currently am just a dog recovery tracking team here at Broken Arrow, but do plan on getting a thermal drone this off season because I think there's benefits to using a drone in certain scenarios over using a dog. So look forward to that in the future. Some drone recovery videos alongside some dog recovery videos. Again, I don't think one is better than the other necessarily. I think they are different tools for deer recovery and can be used in different scenarios. I appreciate everybody. Please like and subscribe if you have not yet.